You were taught that asking for help was the first sign you couldn't handle your own life. And somewhere along the way, that belief became the reason you handle almost everything alone. You didn't learn that from a book, and nobody sat you down and explained it. You learned it from a house where the door unlocked itself when you turned 11, and nobody was coming home until 6, present-day consequence. And now, 40 or 50 years later, that same wiring is still running quietly in the background in your marriage, in your friendships, in the way you sit alone with a problem instead of picking up the phone. That independence built something real in you. It also cost you something, slowly for decades, and that contradiction is the whole story we're about to sit with. Picture a kitchen table with a key taped under the mat, or hidden inside a fake rock by the porch. You were 9, 10, 11 years old, and you had a job. Get home, let yourself in, don't burn the house down, don't call unless it's serious. Both parents working, or one parent stretched thin trying to hold everything together. And nobody really had the bandwidth to hover over a kid who seemed fine. So you didn't grow up watching adults model how to ask for help. You grew up watching them cope without it, day after day, and absorbing that as simply how life worked. By 13, you could make yourself dinner, fix a bike chain, patch a fight with a friend without a parent mediating it, and sit with boredom or fear for hours without anyone checking in on you. That wasn't neglect in the way we'd frame it today, it was just how an entire generation of households ran. Nobody sat you down and said you are now responsible for yourself. It happened by silence, by the empty driveway, by the quiet you got used to filling on your own, night after night, until it stopped feeling like anything unusual at all. And there was a second lesson layered underneath the first one, quieter, but arguably just as sticky. When you did occasionally ask for help with homework, with a problem at school, with something that genuinely scared you, the response was often some version of figure it out or you'll be fine. Not cruelty, most of the time, just parents who were stretched thin and assumed a kid your age didn't need hand-holding the way kids seem to get today. So the message compounded on itself. It wasn't only nobody's here to help me. It slowly became asking doesn't even work, so why bother trying? By the time you reached your teenage years, this wasn't even a conscious belief anymore. It had settled into something closer to instinct, the kind of thing you never examine, because it never occurs to you that it could be examined. Many people who grew up this way will recognize the next part in themselves, even if they've never put words to it before. When a child is repeatedly left to solve problems without an adult stepping in, the nervous system doesn't file that away as sad. It files it away as proof of competence. The lesson isn't nobody was there for me. The lesson quietly becomes I handled it. I can always handle it. That's a survival adaptation, and by most measures a genuinely useful one, until the environment changes and the same rule keeps firing anyway, long after the circumstances that created it are gone. Psychologists sometimes describe this as compulsive self-reliance, a term that traces back to attachment theory and John Bowlby's work on how early caregiving shapes adult behaviour. It describes a learned pattern where needing something from another person doesn't just feel uncomfortable, it starts to feel like evidence of failure. Not I need support, but I've slipped. The two get fused together so early in life that many men who carry this pattern never experience them as separate feelings at all. Asking and failing become, for all practical purposes, the same sensation in the body. What may make this pattern so durable is that it keeps getting rewarded, quietly, over and over. Every time you handled something alone and it worked out, your brain logged another data point. See, I don't need anyone. Nobody ever came along afterward to point out the costly isolation, the missed connection, the relationships that thinned out so gradually you barely noticed. The wins were visible, easy to point to. The losses were invisible, spread out over decades, easy to miss until you're older and looking back, wondering how few people actually know what's going on inside you. There's also a physiological layer worth understanding here. Some researchers who study stress and the body suggest that chronic self-reliance can keep the nervous system in a low-grade state of vigilance, not panic, but a persistent readiness to handle things alone that never fully switches off. Over decades, that kind of quiet, sustained tension may take a toll that has nothing to do with willpower and everything to do with a body that was never given permission to rest into someone else's support. Fast forward to now. You're 55, 60, maybe closer to 70. The stakes are no longer a bike chain or an empty fridge, they're a diagnosis you haven't mentioned to your kids. A financial worry you're carrying by yourself at 2 a.m. A marriage where your wife keeps saying you never tell me what's actually going on with you. A friendship that used to be close, but has gone quiet because neither of you knows how to say I'm not doing great. Retirement can make this louder, not quieter. The job used to give you a socially acceptable reason to be self-sufficient, you are handling things because that's what a provider does, and nobody questions a provider for carrying weight alone. Take the job away, and the self-reliance doesn't disappear. It just loses its cover story. Suddenly you're a man who still can't ask for help, except now there's no title attached to explain why, and the silence that used to look like strength can start to look, even to yourself, like something closer to isolation. This is where the pattern gets expensive. It's a pattern many researchers who study men's health have pointed to, a tendency to underreport symptoms early, delay seeing a doctor or therapist until a problem is already severe, and describe yourself as fine right up until you're very much not. This isn't universal, and it isn't about any one man's willpower. It's a broader tendency observed across a generation raised the same way you were. And it's less about stubbornness than about a rule installed at age 10 that never got updated. Needing help is a failure state, and failure is not something you allow yourself. It shows up in smaller ways too, ways that don't make headlines but quietly shape a whole life over time. The unread text that says just checking in, left sitting there for hours, because responding feels like admitting you're not fully okay. The home project you insist on finishing yourself even when your knees and your schedule are both telling you to call someone. The tendency to give advice easily but receive it badly, because advice flowing outward feels like competence, while advice flowing inward still feels, somewhere under the surface, like a 10-year-old being told to figure it out. Let's be honest about what this trait actually built, because it built a lot, and it deserves real credit. Men who grew up this way tend to be extraordinarily steady in a crisis. You don't panic when something breaks, you fix it, calmly, while everyone around you is still catching their breath. Colleagues lean on you because you don't fall apart under pressure. Your kids probably remember you as the calm one, the one who just handled it, whatever it was, without making a scene. That capacity for composure came directly from a childhood that gave you no other option, and it's rare and it's real. There's also a kind of quiet dignity in it. You never wanted to be a burden. You wanted your family to remember you as someone who carried weight, not someone who added to theirs. That instinct isn't broken. It's arguably one of the more admirable things about your generation of men, and it's worth honouring even as we look honestly at its price. But here's the cost, and it's worth saying plainly instead of softening it. Every time you swallowed a problem instead of naming it, you also swallowed a chance at being known. The people closest to you, a spouse, a son, an old friend, don't just want you to be strong. Many of them are quietly aching for the version of you that would let them in, even just once in a while. Self-sufficiency, taken far enough, doesn't just protect you, it isolates you, and a growing body of research on social connection has linked isolation, especially later in life, to worse outcomes across both physical and mental health. There's also a quieter cost, one that reaches beyond you. You may have modelled this same silence for your own kids without ever meaning to. If they never saw you ask for help, they likely learned the same lesson you did, that needing something makes you weak. The pattern doesn't just live in you. It often gets passed down a generation before anyone notices where it actually came from, repeating itself in ways nobody chose on purpose. It would be easy to end this by saying the old world was harder and it made you tougher. Full stop. That's only half true, and it flatters the story more than it probably should. Yes, that upbringing built a kind of resilience a lot of people today never had to develop, and that resilience is genuinely worth something. But it also taught an entire generation of men to mistake isolation for strength, and those two lessons got tangled together so tightly that separating them now takes real, deliberate work. Both things are true at once. The independence is real. So is what it quietly cost you in closeness. None of this means the trait needs to be torn out. It means it might need a smaller job. The same steadiness that let you fix things alone at 11 can still be yours. It doesn't have to disappear for you to also let someone else in occasionally. Asking for help was never actually proof that you couldn't handle your life. It was just a rule your 10-year-old self came up with because there was no one around to teach him a better one at the time. You're allowed to update it now, not because you're weaker than you used to be, because you finally have people worth letting in, and a life stage where letting them in might matter more than it ever has before. If that instinct to handle everything alone sounds familiar, there's a related pattern worth understanding next: why so many men in this generation can't fully relax even when nothing is actually wrong. Why the vigilance never quite switches off even in calm moments. That's next. Why older Gen X men can't relax even when nothing is wrong.